This is another Patreon request video. The concept here is pretty simple. It's Season 1 of Disventure Camp with half the cast swapped out for the Season 2 cast. Let's get into it. So like in the original, both teams immediately have to vote for someone, not knowing they'll switch teams. For the purple team, they still choose Gabby for being too aggressive, and on the teal team, I think they would pick Drew. Because he doesn't talk and he's also the smallest one there, I think most people would just feel the least connected to him and would rather keep everyone else. So Gabby and Drew switch teams. Hunter and Allie, as well as Kai and Maggie, would essentially become pairs. And as for the Capture the Flag challenge, I think Hunter would be the MVP and lead Allie, Rosa Maria, and Rhea to surround the other team, and with no one to really defend against them, they would get a flag, but Fiore swaps it like in the original for a fake, and Alec tells Drew it's the perfect opportunity to swoop in and take their flag, since knowing they voted him off, plus him being naturally discreet is the perfect setup for them to underestimate him and win it for the purple team, which he does. Hunter and Allie would be too involved with each other to form a bigger alliance, so without Lil there, Will and Nick are just kinda sitting ducks. But Gabby instinctively asks to join Rosa Maria and Rhea, who accepts since Rosa Maria likes her and Rhea's a little weirded out by her, but figures it's a good idea anyway. Fiore still does her shtick and sneaks off to look for the immunity idol. Because Lil isn't here, I think the team wouldn't pull Will on the log riding down the hill since they'd figure he'd be afraid of it, and Lil's the one that suggested it. Instead, Gabby volunteers thinking it'll be fun. But I think the purple team still wins, and the reason is because they have Maggie. She should be able to chop down the log ride much faster than anyone else with her brute strength, and I think James would be on the log for their team, and he should be able to keep up with Gabby just fine, especially when Fiore, knowing about Gabby's nature obsession, would feign sadness about the trees being cut down for the logs, throwing her off her game. This is where I think Alec notices this and he starts to realize Fiore might be more interesting than just some average little girl. Now, when the teal team is sent to elimination, Gabby is obviously in trouble for blowing the challenge, but luckily for her, she has Rhea and Rosa Maria to vote with her. And because Will seems to be afraid of everything, they all decide to vote him off. Problem is, Allie and Hunter are set on Gabby, and so is Will, so their only hope is to get Nick's vote. When they ask him, Nick isn't crazy about the idea since he wants Will's muscle and tells them to their faces why he'd want to keep Gabby around over him, and Rhea butts in and says they'll owe him one, so he agrees, meaning in a 4-3 vote, Will is the first boot. Hunter and Allie start to worry that they're going to be next since they got outvoted last night, so they agree they really need to win this next challenge. Fiore and Alec start hanging out and form an alliance, and Alec's interest in reading and generally preferring introverted people talks about how most of the team is off-putting, but he doesn't actually mind Drew, and that next time they have to vote, they should recruit him. Fiore thinks Drew's a dork, but admits it's not the worst idea. The challenge is the fear-based one, and whoever has the most fails loses. For the purple team, Alec fails canonically, Fiore succeeds canonically, Drew succeeds canonically, and Miriam fails canonically. As for the others, I had Kai being in a dark artificial room with no nature in sight, and for Maggie, I had looking at a reflection of herself with a hyper-realistic ugly filter on it in front of everyone. With the support of each other, both of them succeed, and this brings them closer together, while everyone else just kind of shrugs and asks themselves why they thought that was so scary. And for James, it would be social media withdrawal, which he fails miserably. Because without Aiden or the development that he got, being that this is only episode 3, he has nothing to branch him apart from his clout. Between James, Alec, and Miriam, this gives the purple team 3 fails. As for the teal team, Nick and Gabby both succeed canonically. For Hunter, I have genuinely no idea, probably something creepy and dangerous like needles. Either way, he succeeds because he's desperate to avoid elimination. For Allie, it would be the same thing that Ralph is afraid of in Ralph Breaks the Internet, and believe it or not, she actually succeeds, because her lack of development actually helps her here. Without everyone infantilizing or demonizing her online, with no such reputation, she actually wouldn't care that much about the mean comments. Rosa Maria's fear would be abandonment, which would fail because it hits too close to home, and Rhea and Gabby would comfort her. For Rhea, it would be a hyper-realistic aging reflection, kinda similar to Maggie's, but more emphasis on age instead of, like, general lack of beauty standards, I guess. This is kinda what she was describing being afraid of with Connor, but even without him, I think she would get through it, if not just to show support for her alliance. With Rosa Maria being the only fail on the teal team, this makes them win. This makes the score 3-1, so the purple team loses. And out of everyone who failed the challenge on the purple team, there's one target who's ripe for the picking. Miriam. Alec has people backing him, and James isn't nearly as bitter as Miriam, who doesn't really open up till a few episodes later, especially without Jake here. So Miriam is voted out pretty much unanimously. Again, because Lil and her alliance aren't a thing, I don't think Fiore would do much here. She might be annoyed by Kai a bit, but he mostly keeps to Maggie, so he wouldn't piss her off enough to go after him and burn his things. So we cut straight to the challenge. And the first of 5 points in the Dueling Stick Brawl wins. I used the random number generator to figure out what the matchups are, and here's what I got. First, there's Hunter versus Fiore, and Hunter wins, because duh. Then we have Ali versus Drew, and I had Ali win, for generally just being stronger. Then we had Rhea versus Alec. This is probably the closest round out of all of them, but I decided to go with Alec, because in general he has better feats of strengths, and Rhea wouldn't be nearly as determined as she was in Canon All-Stars or end of Season 2 at this point, so yeah. For Gabby versus James, Gabby wins for being way stronger and way more aggressive. Nick versus Maggie, Maggie wins because she's like 3 times the size. And for Rosa Maria versus Kai, Rosa Maria wins. The score is currently 4-2, and each team presents their strongest player. The teal team chooses Gabby, the purple team chooses Maggie, and even though Maggie is bigger, Gabby wins the final point for the teal team for just having better skills, sending the purple team to elimination. James would pull something similar to what he did in episode 2 with Kai and Maggie, and ask them to vote against Fiore with him, but then of course reveal that he's lying and actually vote for Kai behind their back, along with the other 3, causing Maggie to feel betrayed by James as Kai is sent away. This also alerts Alec because he notes that if James was willing to do that for him, he'll probably do it to him at some point, so he's gotta watch his back. I have no idea who'd be the best at cooking without Miriam here, but I'm gonna assume it's Rosa Maria because, I don't know, she just seems like she knows how to cook, I guess? Also, because she has Gabby and Rhea to plan with, they'd probably be the most coordinated pair here with getting the least terrible ingredients. So purple team loses again, and obviously James and Maggie are voting for each other. Question is, what are the other 3 gonna do? I'm gonna guess they side with Maggie, since having her strength is more useful than James's clout chasing, and plus, Alec would be wary of James' willingness to backstab, assuming it'll be a problem sooner or later, so they vote James out now instead. This is the challenge where one person on each team wins immunity by ringing the bell. Fiore, Alec, and Drew all go together, but as Drew is trying to write a warning, Jensen headshots him, forcing Alec and Fiore to leave him behind unconscious. Also nearby, Maggie is caught by Jensen, who fights him off long enough for Fiore and Alec to get past him, but he still knocks Maggie out pretty quickly, and Alec would get immunity like the original from there. As for the teal team, Hunter and Ali know they're in trouble, so they approach Nick and beg him to vote with them since now the vote is unavoidable, and in confessional, Nick has a smirk saying he knows exactly what he's going to do. With Hunter and Ali desperate for his help, and the other 3 owing him a favor, he holds all the cards, and simply tells Hunter and Ali to sit tight and let him win immunity, in exchange for his cooperation. Which they agree to do since one of them winning immunity practically guarantees the other is gone anyway, which they don't want. So Nick tags along with Gabby, Rhea, and Rosa Maria until they get to the end, and Nick cashes in his favor for voting with them, which is to let him win immunity. Gabby is bummed out since she would have gotten it, but despite what Gabby tells herself, Rosa Maria tells Gabby they gotta stick to her word, so they need to let Nick win. And he does. Of course, they assume Nick is voting Ali with them, but because of how annoyed Nick was with Rhea countering his plans to evade Jason and also advocating against him cashing in his favor for immunity, he chooses to vote off Rhea with Hunter and Ali, while Alec and his buddies vote off Maggie, thinking the merge is coming soon and she's outlived her usefulness, so no need to break the alliance. But of course, the big twist is revealed that whoever was eliminated actually just switches teams, so Maggie goes to the teal team, and rather than there being a tiebreaker, both Ali and Rhea get sent to the purple team. Considering Alec and Fiore won this challenge before with only one other person, and now they have 3, I think they could easily mess with the other team and with how split they are, especially with Rhea messing with Nick blindfolded putting the puzzle pieces together, and Hunter not being as motivated without Ali by her side. Fiore is still put on the wheel to have the stronger players pump the air, and Gabby and Rosa Maria just can't seem to pull the team together, despite their best efforts. So the purple team finishes the puzzle first, and teal team is sent to elimination. Hunter and Nick both have interest in voting Gabby. Hunter because she voted for Ali, and Nick because he already cashed in his favor, so they get Maggie on board pretty easily because frankly, Gabby scares her, especially after she beat her with a dueling stick. Hunter and Nick both have interest in voting for Gabby, and Maggie also doesn't want to risk getting singled out by another alliance again. So the 3 of them vote for Gabby, while Gabby and Rosa Maria vote for Nick. Problem is, Gabby still picked up the immunity idol toward the beginning of the season, and uses it on herself this time, knowing she's a target before the elimination ceremony starts. This nullifies the votes against her, and with Nick having the next most votes, he is eliminated instead, and he's super bitter as he exits. And now the merge begins. Alec and Fiore do something similar to win in the original by pinning Hunter and Ali against Gabby, Rosa Maria, and Rhea in the challenge, so regardless of who's better at the trivia, they all take each other out. And having been on their team before, even though Maggie knows that Alec and Fiore are conspiring against everyone else, it's not enough to stop them, and they ultimately let Drew win immunity like they did with Brett to draw attention away from themselves. I think Alec and Fiore recruit Hunter and Allie against Gabby, since they really want to break Gabby's alliance apart by voting for her, and while Maggie would probably vote for Alec, Alec could still get Drew to join in on this vote, giving them 5, which is the majority, and so Gabby is sent home. Over time, during the VR Zombie Apocalypse Challenge, Fiore betrays Drew and Rhea betrays Rosa Maria as people's true colors come out. Maggie sees Fiore shoot Drew and avenges him by shooting Fiore, but because she's clumsy and such a big target, she and Fiore would end up both shooting each other in the process. Alec and Rhea eventually meet up, and thinking the world is going to end, they end up forming a romantic connection with each other, and neither of them choose to betray each other, being genuinely in love with one another. However, Hunter and Allie have gaming experience, including with first-person shooters, so they've managed to survive this long, and they sneak up on Alec and Rhea during a kiss and shoot both of them. But not before Rhea gets one last shot on Hunter before they die. Rhea, wounded, tries performing CPR on Alec, while Allie does the same for Hunter, and when CPR doesn't work on either of them, there's an intense match to the death between Allie and a wounded Rhea. But Allie ultimately wins since, again, she has gaming experience, and also Rhea is wounded, giving Allie immunity. With tensions now super high across the board, Rhea tries apologizing to Rosa Maria, who'd normally be pretty forgiving, but because she, shot her and didn't know it was fake, despite her excuses about how the VR got to her head, Rosa does not forgive her. Alec comes to comfort Rhea, asking what's wrong, and Rhea explains what happened between her and Rosa Maria. Alec confesses that even though it was a VR simulation, he can't help but feel like something was real between them. And with Rhea desperate for any sort of connection now, truly feels like she means it when she says she agrees. Rosa Maria approaches Maggie and apologizes for leaving her out throughout the game, and Maggie says she understands and is just happy that she's approaching her now. They both agree to vote for Rhea, along with Hunter and Allie, who vote her for, shooting them in the simulation. Meanwhile, Alec and Rhea vote for Rosa Maria, and Fiore and Drew follow suit because they're in an alliance with Alec. This causes a 4-4 tie, and because we have one extra person than we did in the original, instead of a tiebreaker following, both are eliminated. Alec is now utterly heartbroken and can no longer focus on the game.
I am heartbroken.
So in this episode, whoever gets to the clue the fastest is given the optional path to the immunity idol. And in this case, I think that person would be Hunter, who decides to go for it. Fiore slaps Alec and tells him to snap out of it with Rhea being gone, but it doesn't work. So Fiore writes a fake note that says Rhea never actually loved Alec, hoping it'll snap him out of it for good, but it only ends up making him angrier, which scares Fiore, so she instinctively blames it on Drew. Because, he can't talk and only writes. But Maggie steps in to protect Drew from Alec's drunken rage, demanding to know what's going on. Alec blurts out how his life is a mess with his ex-wife and how he was an idiot to think he had something real with Rhea after reading the note, which gives Drew the opportunity to write, "That's not mine," and then everyone does a side-by-side comparison of the handwriting. With it pouring outside, Fiore was hoping the rain would wash the writing enough that people wouldn't be able to distinguish her note from Drew's, but unfortunately for her, they realize it's not actually Drew's. Alec and Maggie both realize that Fiore was the only one both capable and close enough to them to do this, so they all conspire to vote her out at the next elimination. By the way, with all this commotion going on, it's smooth sailing for Hunter and Allie, and Hunter just lets Allie take immunity since he already has the immunity idol and nobody else knows about it, besides Allie, who he probably told, and they vote out Fiore 5-1. Hunter and Allie explore the cave together, with both of them having batteries, while Alec, Drew, and Maggie all get split apart and have empty flashlights. Hunter tells Allie he's really excited to take her to the finale, thinking he's got this in the bag. And when Allie says she's worried they'll get outvoted, Hunter reminds her of the immunity idol, so they can breeze through this round, and after that, all they need to do is clear the competition in the final 4. Meanwhile, Alec still gets attacked by a scorpion and begs for Hunter and Allie's help once they're nearby, and before they can walk away, Alec offers to give them batteries and go with them, so they do. Alec is still depressed and he would genuinely start crying upon seeing Hunter and Allie get along so well, which makes things really, really awkward between the three. Drew doesn't talk and wouldn't be able to get very far, but Maggie would be fighting a scorpion and shove herself off of one, but in the process, falls off of a cliff and lands directly on Hunter and Alec. Once they all get up, they find out the flashlight is broken from Maggie's fall. So she gives her batteries to Allie, who chooses to run to the finish line before anyone else can get there. She has a confessional saying if she wins immunity and Hunter has the idol, they're both guaranteed to win. Maggie and Alec try to chase after her, but Allie ultimately wins immunity anyway. Alec tells Drew and Maggie they have to split Hunter and Allie apart now, although both of them privately suspect this might be out of jealousy rather than strategy. I considered whether or not the fall from Maggie would cause Hunter to accidentally lose his idol, but realistically, I think he would be too focused on making sure it's still on his person for that to happen. In fact, I think Alec would notice this and realize after the challenge that Hunter is hiding something. But I don't think he'd know it was the immunity idol. Instead, I think he would figure it's just like a phone or something with vital information on it. Because of this, Alec confronts Hunter and asks him if he's alright, and keeps it vague, saying if something is bothering him, he can trust him with it. Hunter would get a very shady vibe from this interaction, which leads him and Allie to vote for him, while Alec and the other two vote for Hunter. But, of course, Hunter uses the idol on himself knowing he's going to be a target, nullifying all votes against him, and eliminating Alec instead. Alec wishes Drew good luck and leaves with saggy shoulders and a sad, dejected look on his face. For the best of 5 2v2 challenge, I used a random number generator to decide what the teams are, and I ended up getting Hunter and Drew versus Allie and Maggie, which immediately changes Hunter and Allie's plans of working together and also makes Hunter really nervous since Maggie is by far the strongest one here. First, we have the cliff dive. Alec, Ellie, and Miriam were able to hit the circle in the water, so here I see no reason why the others couldn't. Drew and Maggie would be close to missing for underestimating and overestimating their weight respectively when jumping, but as long as they aim for it, they should be fine. Though I think it'd be funny if Drew wrote something like, uh-oh, while falling, like Wile E. Coyote style. So this is a draw. Next is tug of war. Allie and Maggie clearly win this for obvious reasons. At lunch, Hunter whispers to Drew to discreetly write down that Allie should purposefully throw, since it's in all of their best interest to get Maggie out. But Allie doesn't like this idea since she doesn't want to risk her game like that, and plus, she's confident she could beat Maggie in the finale, which upsets Hunter because he thinks it's a stupid idea. This makes Hunter and Allie overly competitive against each other, and so any hope of them coordinating is a no-go. After the break, we move on to the third challenge, which is to light a fire the fastest. Hunter and Drew take this handedly. Hunter has mentioned being somewhat experienced with the woods, and Drew seems like a crafty enough guy to do this, whereas Maggie was pretty shy and introverted before the season, and Allie is a gamer girl without much of an outdoorsman background. Next is to climb up the flagpole. This one could go either way, but even though Hunter has the best upper body strength, he'd still have to rely on Drew, which would be a detriment because Maggie could give Allie a much bigger boost, and she would also be decent at climbing the pole, so they would win first. Finally, we have the final challenge, which is don't fall off the pole. Last person standing or hugging the pole here is Drew, for the same reason Fiore would have lasted the longest here. He's the lightest. Plus, Hunter's build suggests he's got the most solid upper body strength relative to his size as well, so he'd be able to outlast the girls too. This causes a tie, with the scores both being 2.5 each. And while technically it's canon that the Disventure Camp All-Stars tiebreaker would have been used here, I think Maggie and Allie would both suck at it, so instead, I'm just gonna say there's another round of stay on the pole. Only now, if Hunter or Drew win, they get to choose who's eliminated. Allie is really mad that she lost to Hunter, but Hunter tells her to relax since as long as they can both hang on, she'll be safe. Maggie, struggling to stay on, would jump on Allie out of desperation, and from there, Drew would narrowly outlast Hunter because his lightweight would win out in the end, especially with all the stress Allie is giving Hunter. This gives Drew the decision of who to eliminate, and he slowly and dramatically writes the name of the person he's bringing to the finale, which turns out to be Maggie. Allie is infuriated with everyone, and Maggie genuinely feels really bad about winning the way she did, but is also sick of being targeted all the time and being made to feel like she doesn't belong. So she thinks she had to. Drew remembers what Alex said about splitting Hunter and Allie apart, and realized it was necessary for a fighting chance at the finale. Hunter feels bad about not being able to bring Allie to the end with him, and is determined to make it up to her. Drew just writes, "Yay," on paper. Maggie is really surprised she made it this far and is nervous about the finale. For the helpers, Hunter picks Allie, Drew picks Alec, and Maggie picks Rosa Maria. Maggie confides in Rosa Maria that she feels guilty about the way she won yesterday, and that she promises to play fair from here on out. And unlike with Rhea, Rosa Maria wouldn't be upset because she had used one cheap trick for the game instead of being outright malicious repeatedly. So Rosa would understand where she's coming from. However, the other two have a very different approach, as Allie is still really pissed at Maggie, and Alec uses her anger to suggest the four of them team up for the final two, which Allie agrees to, and so does Hunter. Not only because he wants to make it up to Allie, but also because it's a decent idea, and Drew gives a thumbs up. With that, the challenge begins, and Hunter and Drew stick together and have a slight lead. Hunter and Drew find their keys in the lake, while Allie and Alec hang back to try and distract Maggie. Once Maggie gets there, Allie trips her, saying, "Sorry, not sorry," and she and Alec hold her down. Rosa Maria gets the key, and then slaps Alec across the face, giving Maggie the opportunity to throw Allie off her back and get past both of them. Alec says, "Oh crap," and Allie shouts "damn it" in frustration. Hunter and Drew both grab their maps from the chest and go, while Maggie isn't too far behind them to do the same. Once she grabs her map, she begins to tire and Rosa Maria tells her to keep going, while Alec and Allie rush to catch up with Hunter and Drew. Hunter sees Allie and Alec in the distance, which prompts him to say, "Sorry, kid," and pushes Drew on the ground. But Drew figured this might happen, so he took Alec's advice from before the challenge started and secretly took Hunter's map. And even though he has a good sense of direction, Hunter's still kinda screwed without it. By the time Hunter notices he's going the wrong way, Drew already crosses the finish line and Maggie's had time to catch up. Drew writes down that he took Alec's advice. Drew writes down, "I took your advice," showing it to Alec, and Alec hugs Drew and tells him he's genuinely proud of him. And then Alec has a confessional, realizing that's the first time he's ever said those words. Maggie and Hunter end up crossing the finish line at the exact same time, causing, you guessed it, another tiebreaker. And now we get the tiebreaker from Disventure Camp All-Stars, which, let's be real, Hunter wins pretty easily. Maggie is naturally nervous and isn't used to survival skill-based stuff with steady hands, even with the development she went through this season, whereas Hunter is much better equipped for this. But Rosa Maria comforts Maggie after her loss, and Maggie is proud to have gotten this far. This means the final two is Hunter versus Drew. They both dig for the gasoline tanks with Alec and Allie's help, and Alec, genuinely feeling proud of Drew, would sabotage Hunter's car the same way Gret did, except without cutting the wires and only pouring a beer into the other car, which would slow it down just enough so that Drew can catch up to Hunter despite not really knowing how to drive. You might think Allie would catch on to this, but you gotta remember she's flooded with adrenaline after beating Maggie, and would be much more focused on helping Hunter dig. So Hunter and Drew are both neck and neck, with Hunter's engine starting to sputter out and Drew right next to him. Hunter tries to drive Drew off the road, but when he tries this, Drew swerves the wheel, making him spin out of control and hit the same tree Fiore did. But he would also hit Hunter's car in the process, and his car would completely run out of juice, and from there, they both have to push their cars to the finish line. And because Alec and Allie would be helping push, with Alec having the most strength and Drew's car being closer to the finish line, they very, very narrowly win the season together, making Drew the winner of $1 million. Alec hugs Drew super tightly while everyone celebrates, except for Hunter and Allie, and Fiore, who's just bitter, though Hunter and Allie do make up in the end. Trevor and Derek still get arrested. Alec fights off Jensen the same way Tom did in canon, which, believe it or not, he can do since Alec and Tom have been shown to have relatively equal levels of strength, and Drew gets his money back. So that's going to be it for this episode. I admit it was kinda hard to figure out how to write the merge section of this video in particular, because a lot of the characters were either really early boots with not much to go off of, or they were under circumstances that were kinda similar but still different enough that I genuinely had a tough time deciding how things would go. Like with Alec and Fiore's alliance and tactics, for instance. Shout out to all my Patreon subscribers, which I somehow now have 6 of in less than 4 months, which I'm seriously grateful for. And also, I realized a lot of the videos I already recorded, I may have forgotten to mention that. So yeah, really want to emphasize that here. Anyway, I'm a musical individual, and I'll see you for the next video.